Safari Light and Bluetooth Speaker Acrylic Painting Tutorial by HotPinkZebraPaper. So this is a little Bluetooth speaker that you just tap the top of it and it changes, it turns on, it becomes lit, and it changes color too. This little speaker is something that I actually got from my sister, and she got them as a promo from her job. So I'm well aware that you guys probably don't have access to such a thing. That being said, you can take this little design and apply it to anything you want. And I also want to stress that you can paint anything. And I thoroughly believe that just about anything can be painted. I have painted my cat with Pet Safe Paint. I have painted myself. I have painted almost any surface I can, including these speakers. So I just wanted to say that too, that even though you probably don't have the ability to get a little speaker like this, there are so many things out there that can be painted if you're just willing to look for them. So I began with the elephant, and I'm going to start with his outlines, and I just did all of the outlines. I just started in the middle and kind of worked my way outwards. I can't see the his entire ears because they are too big for the little design, but I got a pretty good amount of them in there, and I'm just going to continue on and create all of those basic outlines. So then with some slightly diluted black paint, I'm going to be starting to fill in all of his shadowing. So I'm going to start in his ears, and the reason I say slightly diluted paint is this is multi-surface paint, which is the thing that you really have to use when you're painting things that are shiny or going to get used. I know that I use multi-surface paint every time I paint a phone case, which I do relatively frequently. So anytime you're using something or doing something like that, this paint can go in the dishwasher, on glass. I've used it for all sorts of stuff, indoor, outdoor, but that's the kind of paint that you need to use here. And it's just acrylic craft paint, but it's multi-surface, or sometimes they say that they're for glassware. So just look at the bottle and see if it says that it's good for anything. And then that's the kind that you want to use for something that's like this. But you can't dilute it very much because then it beads up and it kind of does some funky things. So just dilute it slightly and use very thin layers of the paint, and the light will still show through. So I'm just going to continue adding all of that paint on here and making sure that it's all filled in and that you can still see all of the different areas and planes of his body, but that it's not so outliney anymore. And then going back to that full strength black paint, I'm going to be adding all of the details. So all of the wrinkles on his trunk and his forehead and his ears, more details to his eyes and around his eyes, just basically everything that needs to be added in there, I'm going to be doing with more of that black paint. And this paint is, when it's full strength, it is very, very opaque. So any of these places that you're adding this full strength black paint, you have to be aware of that it's not going to show any light through it. So just keep that in mind, that you don't want to overdo the usage of this full strength black paint, because it's not going to, using the right amount is going to look really cool with the light turned on. But if you use too much of it, it's going to look just really dark. So then I added just a couple white highlights on his tusks and on his eyes because I went a little crazy with the diluted black paint and I overshadowed things. So I added that. I didn't do that on the rest of them because I then caught myself and made sure that I didn't do that. But then I'm going to be filling in the background with just more of that black multi-surface paint, filling in everything around him. And as you're doing this, I did end up using 3 coats on the background just to make sure that it really was completely blackout black. And I ended up painting the next coats of the background by turning on the light and making sure that I covered up any areas that really needed it. So then for the next one, I'm going to start with a giraffe. And for him, I started with like his lip area, and then I began and built upon that, moving outwards. And the giraffe is actually my favorite one of these, of this one on this little Safari speaker. I really liked him. I've never painted a giraffe before like this, so it was almost a little scary, but I like that. So I was pretty happy with the way this guy turned out. And I'm just going to keep adding the little details to him, not overdoing it either, because I know that I'm going to be adding this shadowing. So same thing, I'm going to go through with that very, very slightly diluted black paint. And I'm going to be adding all of the shadowing and details on him. And on these things, you don't want to overdo the black paint in your shadows either, because that is also blocking out light. So you want this to look good when it's not lit up and when it is lit up. So you kind of have to keep that in mind and make sure that you monitor the amount of paint that you're adding so that it looks good no matter what. And so then going back through that full strength black, I'm going to be adding all of the details. So I'm going to be adding details. Actually, first I'm adding the shadows in his ears, which I didn't do before. But then I'm going to go through and add all the details. So I'm going to be adding the details to his eyes as well as around his eyes. And with this guy, you also have to add all of his spots. But I also took and made a whole bunch of little lines to add the fur texture on his mane. And then add the little spots on his face and add his nostril, and then all the spots going down his neck. And one other thing I want to mention is this is not the first light and Bluetooth speaker that I have painted. If you are enjoying watching this and like these little characters or little animals that I'm painting, these little animal portraits, I also did one that was sea life themed, and there was a turtle, a jellyfish, a octopus, and it'll come to me in a moment. There was 4 sea creatures. Oh, a seahorse. There we go. Knew it would come to me in a moment. So I'll put a link to that video in the description box below, and there will also be more of these in the future. I know that I'm planning on doing a cat one because I've got a couple more speakers, and so I'll be painting those. And so if you like these, definitely check back to see if and when, I mean, I know I will be, but when I upload the next couple ones. It'll be a little while, take a break from them for a second and paint something else, but I will definitely be painting more of these in the future. So then after I had my giraffe all done, I filled in his background with black, just like the elephant. And now I'm going to be painting the rhino. Same thing, starting out with just the outlines of everything on him. For him, I started with sort of the silhouette of his forehead coming down, and then I added his horns. There we go. Here's a little fun fact about rhinos that I didn't think about until just recently. Rhinos are the first thing that I drew without watching or looking at a tutorial. I started drawing from written tutorials that I found from this wonderful website that's called Drago Art. If you ever look at just picture tutorials, that website has so many things and so many really detailed, great drawing tutorials. That's where I started with when I was first beginning out and deciding to venture into the realism realm of art in the art world. That's the place that I turned, and there's so many wonderful things there that if that's something that you're interested in, I highly recommend you go there. I have sent all of my nephews that like to draw, I've always said, let's go to this website because there are so many wonderful tutorials on there. So check that out. But a rhino is the first thing I drew without a tutorial. So that was a really big momentous moment in my drawing career, is that first time that I decided that I was going to just draw from a photograph. And I would have to say, for the time frame, it turned out pretty good, and I was really happy with it. Now I'm like, there's a lot of things I would change, but it was an exciting thing. So anyways, go through and do all of that, and then after you've got all of your shadowing on your rhino, so I also added lots of shadows on him, I'm going to go through the same way and add all the details on him with black. On the rhino, there aren't nearly as many details and wrinkles and stripes and spots as there were on the elephant and on the giraffe, or as there will be on the zebra, which is the next one. But he does have a couple wrinkles on his back and a couple on his legs and on his face, but just not nearly as many. And then I'm going to be filling in the background with black paint, solid, just filler up, and make sure that you do really go right next to all of your lines. You don't need a little gap between your animal and the black background. You need to fill it in entirely because you don't want any light to sneak through. That's, like I said, though, after you've got that coat on there, you can turn the light on and see if there's anything that's showing, and then go through and black it out later on too. So then I'm going to start my zebra. The other thing I want to mention about this multi-surface paint that is pretty important is that it is not so sturdy immediately. It takes about 4 hours to dry completely. I usually wait about half an hour between coats on things with this multi-surface paint. It takes longer than regular acrylic craft paint, but it takes 28 days to become safe to use and to be outdoors and things, or you can stick it in the oven. But since you can't put an electronic speaker in the oven, I am very carefully letting this little speaker sit and relax for those 28 days so that I don't mess it up, because right after I painted this, I was just looking at it and I dropped it, and thankfully none of the animals got messed up, but a nice big section of black background got scraped off, and I had to repaint that on there. So for a little while after you use this multi-surface paint, when you're doing things, just read on the bottle what it says. It should say on the back of it what the stipulations are for being so multi-surfacely sturdy. And just make sure that you don't have it in a precarious situation where it could get messed up before the paint is actually entirely dry. So after I have my zebra's outlines in there, not his stripes, just his outlines, I'm going to go through and add all the shadows like before. And he's got a bit of darkness on right on the tip of his nose and like his lip area and around his nostrils. So make sure that you do add that, but do not use full strength black paint because you do want light to show through it when the light is on. So make sure that that is not so solid. And then I'm going to go through and add all of his stripes. And I'm going to start the stripes in the center of his face and work my way outwards. And you do need to add the shadows on there. I know when I was first painting this, I'm thinking, oh, I don't have to worry about adding shadows on a zebra. He's white and black. And then I'm thinking to myself, what am I thinking? What am I thinking? He's got shadows on him. Of course he does. So make sure that you do add those shadows, but they don't have to be quite as much as the other ones. So then I'm going to be adding all of his stripes going on there, as well as the details to his eyes, and then adding the details to his mane, and then adding all the stripes on his back. Now, there are so many kinds of zebras, and they have different stripe patterns. I know what kind of zebra this is. It's right like on the tip of my tongue, but he's got nice wide neck stripes, so I made sure that I added those and didn't keep them as thin as they were on his face. And then I'm going to be filling in the background with black paint like I did with all of the other ones. And like I said before, you want to make sure that his nose is not solid black, that it is diluted when you put that on there, so that it does show up separately from the background and you can still see it and see all the details and it's not lost. So then here's the speaker as it's turned on, and it really is so much fun to kind of play with and look at and just have. I have it sitting right next to where I sit on the couch, and so I like to turn it on. Yeah, these speakers are fun and cool, and all of the pieces in the video fragments in the tutorial could be applied to anything. You could paint a lampshade using these same ideas. That would look amazing. You could definitely do that with a lampshade. Now I might have to do that. And it would be the same thing with the light coming through it. And once you start thinking about these things, there are a lot of opportunities to paint with and use light in it. So I hope you like this, and I hope that you might have found some interesting information in here, whether or not it's one of these animals related or otherwise. And like I said, I do have another one of these videos, and there will be a link to that in the description box below. And as I make more in the future, I'll put those in there too. I don't know what they'll all be, so I don't know yet, but definitely check down there because there will be more in the future, I promise. And so if you like those, don't forget that. And share any recreations with me on Facebook or Instagram, and definitely hit me up for questions if you got anything, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!